Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Charity Charge Show. This is Grayson Harris, and today we are pleased to be joined by Karl Thomsen. He is the Executive Director of Hope Ignites Cincinnati, and they are doing incredible work for the youth of their city. Karl, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'm pretty stoked to be here, Grayson. It's been a pleasure meeting you and what you guys are doing in underscoring and highlighting, and if not amplifying others in the global space that are doing important work. So thank
Of
you.
course, and on that note of amplifying the work, tell us and the audience a little bit more about the work that you're doing out there in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I'm going to stay pretty broad because there's so much ground that we cover that it doesn't make sense to get any depth. But from a 20,000 feet in the air, we focus on underprivileged kids ages fifth grade and stay with them through college or trade school, whichever they elect to go. Those things mean several aspects of what we manifest that differently. One is we have a residential program. Parents or guardians that have identified that their scholar or student or child would be better off if they were in a different residential environment to be able to perpetuate their studies or their development of their scholastic discipline. So we have a house that we foster that environment. They spend the night, they live there. We work with partnerships with schools to support them financially, support them food-wise. We provide therapy, financial literacy, making sure they do their homework, and also kind of world holistic and ACT, SAT prep and all that kind of stuff. We also have an academy for those scholars that don't need a residential place, but need the scaffolding and assistance in the same regards, but they go home every night, right? So we go pick them up from their schools, bring them here, and we have lots of program initiatives to help that. We have an outreach program where we do a STEM collaborative in elementary underserved community, where we'll introduce hands-on AI, robotics, CAD, coding, the parts of technology that schools really haven't yet fully embraced, with the ideology that if our underprivileged kids can grab a hold of that, there's a portion of their contribution that they own that is unique to them. And it kind of starts to eliminate imposter syndrome while building confidence that they belong in this world of scholastic endeavors. And then our last thing is our college program, where we stay with them. We fill the gap on what government or FAFSA does not provide financially, but we have weekly check-ins with them to make sure they're constantly have a resource for us through us in being successful.
Thank you for that context. And what was so fascinating to me about our prior conversations and the research that I did is this idea of sticking with the student a lot longer through this process than traditionally is done through
Yes.
support services. Can you tell me a
Yes.
little bit more about this philosophy of
Yeah.
building success within the youth on a lot longer of a time horizon?
Yeah. So if we think about this comparison or simile, if a kid now enters high school and they say, you know what, I think I want to try swimming, it's absolutely too late these days. These kids that are in swimming in high schools and are competitive, or lacrosse or anything else, they're starting in second and third grade. We don't really triage the same way for academics.
Hmm.
And so sometimes we wait till their ninth grade year to say, hey, we got some remediation to offer. So we want to start earlier. And our number that we shoot for is the number 27. That's the age at which, on the average, people develop fully cognitively. And so we want to stay with them as long as possible. So we stay 6 years post-secondary. It gets us to 24, so just shy of 27. But we haven't thought of creative solutions to stay with them as adults. Since they're out in the world, then that's a kind of a different thing.
Amazing. And what is the benefit that you see from that kind of methodology?
Yeah, I think the benefits are numerous, and anecdotally, we could probably go down the rabbit hole of talking about those things. But fundamentally, we are trying to develop the mitigation of imposter syndrome. So look, every human goes through this. Every human at some point deals with the fear of I will be discovered and I'm not as good as I say, that kind of thing. With kids that come from under-resourced communities, that's exacerbated. And what we've inadvertently taught them is that there's an assimilation presentation that they need to adopt to so that they look like they're successful. I think this has been our probably largest travesty in our efforts, well-meaning initiatives. But if we're not fundamentally shifting that in their youth, they own what they're learning and they have the potential, what inevitably happens is they get to a college where they're more isolated and they look around and they know fully well I didn't earn this and I don't belong here. And that has led to a lack of success in furthering post secondary what success is defined as. That's why we stay with them 6 years. I think the national stat on kids that come from this demographic is that within 6 years of post secondary, about 17 or 18% are successful in graduation or matriculation of some kind. In our program, we've been able to raise that to a 68, 69% efficacy. So
Wow.
it's it's a it's a pretty significant thing, but along the way, it's really about how do I know I belong? And we do that by teaching that donorship mindset has to displace the necessity of recipient mindset. And that's maturation, that's ownership.
I absolutely love that. And you stepped into this role. I'd love for some context as well. Beginning of this year, and
Yes.
you as you mentioned, there is many facets of the work that this organization is doing. As you kind of stepped into the role and you looked at and strategically we're looking at all the different aspects of the organization. How did you sit down with the team and really kind of identify what does success look like for our organization with these youth that we're serving?
That's an excellent question. And that was, pretty sensitive ground to navigate because there's a lot of rhetoric now that is taboo, honestly. Right. And so, in addressing those things, the primary goal was to address the elephants in the room. And if we're going to solve this problem and we're earnest about it, then first principles thinking took over.
Yeah.
Make no assumptions. And if we could take over and build this from scratch, what would it look like? And let's not use the present educational system to emulate them or as our gold standard, but let's just eradicate in our head what would be the most effective way. And that's a pretty strong contagion. People love that idea, right? And disrupting anything, first of all, is alluring, but more importantly, it feels authentic and real, and perhaps we can make real headway on some of the things that we've inadvertently created
Mm.
that are not as successful.
I really appreciate that. And as y'all had those conversations, what was that outcome? How did y'all identify success for the organization?
The outcome was simply scaling was a part of our success metric. Unless we want to assume that the demand is really low and there aren't very many people that need this, right? So affecting and making a larger footprint
Mm.
so that the community as a whole understands that this is a resource. One, that's a success metric. Two, in our individual conversations and our provision of therapy with these young people, that no matter what we teach them, no matter what we are putting in front of them, they're not eating from the plate if emotionally they're not able to execute because
Mm.
of the things that they're hearing. I say, as a 60-year-old man, those tapes are playing. That's an old concept. I'm still analog, right? But it's really what are the voices that we're listening to that prevent us from succeeding? And understanding that success doesn't look like a holistic package,
Mm.
it's little bites along the way, that we're in a long term game. We're running a marathon.
Yeah.
We're not sprinting to anything. So we are seeing the normal data improvements. GPAs are rising, test scores are rising, more kids are being involved, more partnerships, more volunteers. All of those things get contagion. But the essence of our success is person X, individual. Jamie Mayweather is owning what he wants to do, and he understands that he has the power to control that and that endeavor.
Thank you for that context. And I think it underscores this kind of challenge within the nonprofit space, right? So many organizations, they have this incredible mission. They're making an incredible impact on their community. And oftentimes the time horizon on that is long. And
Yes.
as you communicate with donors and community members and the stakeholders of these organizations, they're really looking for short-term
Yeah.
success. It's just the way that sometimes we're wired to think. How, in terms of communication with the stakeholders in the community and your donors, are you managing this long horizon in terms of getting that buy-in, but then
Yeah.
also communicating these short-term wins that are happening?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Thank you for that. And honestly, there are two very simplistic approaches, although execution of these aren't as simple, right? They're complex. But one is in the same as talent acquisition, stakeholder acquisition has to be concentrated on not in a scarcity mindset, but an
Mm.
abundance. There are stakeholders out there who understand long term, who want to see that the long term is what our goals are. And when you start to attract those people, that mission is easily aligned or
Mm.
easier to align. So I think in some simple terms, if you want people to support you from a donor standpoint, find the donors that believe in the mission long term. That's simple, right? Two, I think Cincinnati, and I'm not a Cincinnatian I'm not a native to this area. I'm actually akin to your proximity. I grew up in San Antonio, but I have found that Cincinnati as a city is a large, small town. And the stakeholders here, because of our presence with Procter and Gamble, or Kroger, and large industries, I have found that there are an abundance of donors who think this way.
Hmm.
We are very fortunate to have strong support from high earning individuals and companies that are saying to us, we believe in this. And if it's a 10-year tail, we're in it for the long haul.
Thank you, and it's incredible to hear that you have that buy-in with your
We're
community.
lucky.
Yeah,
Mhm.
100%. And, for a nonprofit audience that's, maybe tuning in that are looking to build that culture and build that within their community, what would be,
Right.
a piece of advice or a lesson that you would want to, share in terms of fostering that?
Yeah, I think I always think in this terms, and I'm sorry, I'm a little bit of an astronomy hobbyist. So I always think of it this way: there's a planet on which we want to be like. We want to be on this planet, and there's a planet that exists that where is the reality of who we are. The polarity of thinking in only extreme terms does not help us build the bridge in between to get from one planet to the other. The most important thing that we can convey to donors, community, schools, partners, volunteers is the authenticity of our mission. If the leadership within the mechanism is our believers of the mission, then we have mitigated many of the problems in who we draw, how we communicate, and regardless of the syntax we use, right, whether it's me or somebody else that's representing us, it doesn't matter because it all points to this ball of authenticity that is residing in the gray space between who we want to be and where we are.
That was a great answer, and this idea of value forward
Yes,
mentality and mission alignment is key within the nonprofit space, and it's brought up all the time. A follow up point to that, as you look to this internal team that's leading the way and is being this this guide for the organization and the donors and community to follow. How are you fostering that within the leadership team, and then also how does that reach all aspects of the organization? Because I know that y'all are a complex team
we
and
are.
a diverse amount of people and large staff. So what does that look like?
I love that. And I'm going to touch a little bit on something we did prior to going live. My background and my love is as a conductor. There's nothing more complex than conducting an opera, right? You have singers, you have chorus, you have orchestra, you have a lot of factors. And understanding that my role is that I'm not singing and I'm not playing an instrument. I've got a little stick I'm holding, and my job is to the cohesion of bringing talent together and allowing them the autonomy to believe our mission in their manifestation, in their voices. I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by some pretty incredible people. I would be remiss not to say that even though I'm kind of a figurehead, that it's probably more accurate to think of me as a hood ornament on a car that's pretty elegant in the way it operates. And so I think that's the fundamental thing. And I know that's a little cliche. It's almost like NFL speak where the quarterbacks come up and everybody gets credit and the quarterback takes the blame. I understand that cliche. And I'm not disparaging it, but I don't mean it as a cliche. I mean, honestly, without supporting cast that does their work and believes in it, the aggregate, it falls flat. I can't be single led. It's communal.
How do you build that mentality and that philosophy? Because I think it's something that leaders and I find myself struggling with as well. So
Yes.
how can you foster that in terms of
Yeah.
leading a team?
I love that. I think of that in terms of sphere of influences. And if I personally, from my inside to out, and I'm authentic, I'm vulnerable, I'm trying to speak my truth, flaws and all, then it also draws my sphere of influence to influence others of like ilk to come along. That building, I wish I could bottle and say this is the formula to build those teams, but there is not one. Otherwise, I would be probably on my way to space myself because I'd be making so much money from bottling, being able to bottle that, right? But I really think the inside out model, that the most internal source, and if it's mine as the leader, that I'm able to do that authenticity and build that, flaws and all. I have many, many, but if I can handle that and open that vulnerability to draw other people like it, before you know it, we've got a team of a dozen or a team of 25 or a team of 50. And the dilution of that mission does not happen at the same declination if the mission and the authenticity is validated by this inside out.
I think that makes a lot of sense, right? And if we look back to kind of how we got to this point, it's like, well, how do you have a organization that is, successful? Well, you have an organization that's leading with their values. Well, how do you do that? Well, you have a leadership team that's leading with their values. Well, how do you
Yes.
do that? You have, you are,
Yes.
wanting to lead with your values and share that and kind of lead by example in that way. So I think
No,
it makes
that's
total
right.
sense.
Yeah. And it's not a narcissistic, I'm the center of the stage. But if I dismiss that it's got to start with me, I've lost everything. The dilution is exponential by the time you get to the third rung of execution, right?
Well, as we look to thank you again for sharing all this, and as we look towards the end of the year, what does the future look like for the organization as we come on your 1 year anniversary there, and yeah, what does the future look like?
Well, I will tell you that I'm pretty idealistic, optimistic, and I'm somewhat of a dreamer. Okay. So if I would not be surprised if the 10-year scope is that we fundamentally build an educational institute that looks and feels very differently than what we've done historically. Right. I don't want to use the words disruption, but it means kind of that. Fair. And so I think in our small term success after a year anniversary, we've gone from approximately 19 to 25 scholars impacted to starting in January at 180 plus. So it's not about going and acquiring kids to come. It's the contagion that inspires people to be a part of what we do. So that sounds a little Pied Piper-esque and maybe a little dreamy, but in essence, that's what's actually happening.
And how should our audience get involved with that and help that dream, become a reality?
Oh man. I mean, you can be involved if you're local, you can be involved with your hands and feet. Have a hands in the dirt program where we're actually manifesting planting gardens, indigenous plants, talking about ecology, photosynthesis, nutrition, farm to table kinds of ideology. We've got 28 lessons that we've parsed out to be applicable mathematical principles found in the game of basketball, right? Those kind of principles to put your feet in or hands in the dirt, so to speak. If you want to join us in your local, come on our website, Hope Ignites Cincinnati. Come join us. If you want to financially support us, we will always receive that. There's a QR code on the same site that you can scan and depart with millions if you would like, or thousands, or hundreds, or $1. I'm all good with any of it. But if you have ideas in the same continuum that we're speaking about, we don't own this, right? Here's what I found, that if you trip over innovation and you're humble enough to stay down for long enough, you actually find others who have tripped over the same thing. There's no single innovation that any of us own. There's a human movement out of necessity that starts to react to pendulums, right?
Well, Karl, thank you for coming on and sharing more about, your philosophy of
You're
on
welcome.
leadership and conducting the organization as your background puts it. Uh, you
Nicely
know,
done.
thank you for coming on the show today.
Oh, Grayson, it was a pleasure meeting you guys. And anytime we can help with any fostering of other entities, we love to partner with other missions. So reach out. We're glad to be here. We've got a lot of work to do, but we're happy to do it.
Amazing.